Hey everybody, welcome to No Vacancy Live. Anthony, I hear we're live. Is that the case?
We're live, and we're today. You're going to join the United States Air Force.
I'm looking forward to it. Let's see if the United Air Force will allow me to join.
I'm Anthony. Welcome to No Vacancy Live. That's my friend Glenn.
You're watching the #1 show in hospitality.
Hey everybody, welcome to No Vacancy Live. I'm Glenn Hausman. That's Anthony Melchiori. Anthony, today's going to be a fun, super special show. But before we get into that, I want to thank the good folks at the Boston Park Plaza Hotel. I did a speaking gig here last night. They're allowing me to use this incredible historic grand ballroom for today's presentation. So thanks, folks over here.
Thanks, folks over there.
Anthony, I'm going to let you take this one away because this is something that's you're much more connected to. We got to go to the Pentagon last fall. It was one of the most incredible professional experiences I've had, but you just can't get enough of that Air Force, and that makes me happy.
Well, first of all, I want you to be proud of me because I still fit in my uniform, as you can see. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to know what rank this uniform says. Like, what rank am I?
I have no idea even where to begin. I'm going to guess it's not Commander-in-Chief.
It's not. It's sergeant, basic sergeant. So I was a sergeant. I left the Air Force as a sergeant, but today I did a speaking gig down San Antonio, and I was able to meet a gentleman. I'll just say Chief Bogdan, and he's the Chief Enlisted Force Development Officer, and he'll tell you all about that. But again, when I was a young kid just trying to get into the Air Force, just like surviving basic training was my goal. And now that I get to hang out and talk to chiefs, especially chiefs that work at the Pentagon that are responsible for such large numbers of men and women, is just amazing. So without further ado, let's bring on the chief.
And hey, Brett, for listening. Chief, great to see you. Welcome to our show here at No Vacancy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Anthony and Glenn. It's an absolute honor to be on the show with y'all. And Anthony, it's so great. I know we've been texting back and forth for a couple months now, but it's great to see you again. And really,
well, you're always in a different country or something.
Yeah, it's some of that, but I think you've been pretty busy too, man.
Yeah, I've been a little busy, but when I was young and we had a chief looked like me and older. Didn't look like you that just graduated college.
Grateful. I will thank my parents for the genes. I'm a little bit older than I probably look, but
how long you been in? How long
been in? I just hit 22 years last week, actually. So it's been a great time.
And when did you get the chief pinned on?
I got chief pinned on in 2018. So that was at my 17-year mark. And and for the audience that doesn't, that doesn't know how the promotions work, I made it. And the year prior, I had to wait a full year before I could put it on because of my time. Yeah.
So Glenn, to become a chief in 16 years, it's like driving a motorcycle 1,000 miles an hour and never crashing. So Chief, tell them, could you be a chief faster than basically 16 years? Or is that the fastest you can become a chief?
No, you can be a chief faster. It's just unlikely, but I know a lot of people that have. So Anthony, I know and Glenn, you both talked to the Chief Master Sergeant Air Force, so a little bit more than a lot of people do. But as a E9, as a Chief Master Sergeant, you're top 1% of the entire enlisted force. So there's very few opportunities to go into that position and rank. So it's difficult. You can make it faster, but yeah, I would say that I've been very blessed.
I've never heard anybody making faster. And just so how many below the zones did you have to make?
So when I was in,
that sounds dirty.
When I first came, yeah. So when
What's
I came
that?
into the Air Force,
that sounds dirty. Go on, Chief.
So it doesn't have to be though, but so when I first came into Air Force, we only had one below zone opportunity for the enlisted, which we still do now. The officers have a couple different opportunities, but for us, we only had one. So I got the one below the zone at senior airman. So being able to put on the rank of senior airman E4 6 months early.
So you know what, Chief, we have that in common. I was also below the zone senior airman. And okay, were you distinguished graduate or honor graduate in NCO school?
So I was none, I was none of those things. It's interesting that you bring that up.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't get my first distinguished graduate until I went to Senior NCO Academy, which is our senior leadership experience. So
And
it,
that's
it took
probably
a
much
while.
more competitive. I actually became, I was distinguished graduate, but
Mhm.
not honor graduate. I'm still
Mm.
pissed off about it.
I can tell.
So I'd like to just spend a second, like
Yeah.
bridging our different worlds together, and
Yeah.
while we're speaking with you today. So for all of our younger listeners out there, the military and the hospitality industry have so much in common, and there are so many great leaders in the hospitality industry that I think really learned how to find themselves and be incredible professionals by having that military experience. Most notably, the CEO of Best Western has been in the military, so many others. And Anthony, I know for you, going into the Air Force really helped frame your entire life and set you on the right path. Now, Chief Joe, you're Chief of Enlisted Force Development, right? That sounds really interesting to me, because that tells me you're helping people find themselves and learn how to be great members of the military and society, right, Chief Joe?
Yeah, I would say that is so interesting. So I started off my career actually as a with an engineer background. I was a backup generator guy, so I was a mechanic slash
Mhm.
partial electrical
Right.
work, and worked my way up in that career field. And I've always had just a passion for development, growing airmen, whether that's personally, technically, anything, anywhere in between, trying to help airmen become the best version of themselves. And when I say airmen, I say big A, because we have civilian teammates and everything, right? So I guess just through my reputation of doing that, one day your former guest, Chief Master Sergeant Air Force, decided that
Right.
that even though I'm not necessarily in the what we call the A1 community, which is more of that force development, training, and personnel, that she wanted me to come up into this position to help drive policy that could influence development across the entire Air Force.
So give us an example of what that means. Give us like something you've recently worked on or something you're working on that influences the entire Air Force.
Yeah, so something that I'm working on right now, and we can't go too much into depth because not a lot of
Mhm.
people have heard about it. Who knows who's going to listen to this? But we're trying to change our entire development, what we call the ecosystem.
Right.
What we do is we typically, you come into the Air Force, you go through basic training just like all the other services. We're trying to teach you to become a service member versus a civilian, right? So that
Mhm.
that takes a lot of training, and then you go to training to learn whatever your specialty is, whatever we want you to do. In the Air Force, that technical skill that we need
Right.
you to take on. So we go to technical training school, and then you go to your first base and you get your development. We have some of the best upgrade training development in the world. And I will tell you, I know that because I talked to people like Anthony, as well as other folks that have been out, got out the military, and the development is just, they feel like they can gain a lot learning from how we do it in the military. But we don't just train you on your technical competency. We also start training you on how to be a leader. We train you on character development, and then also each of those core development. So all this is happening at one time. And something we're doing is working on how do we fill some of the gaps in between the formal development with more meaningful and also on time, and also you leveraging technology like today that
Right.
the airmen want to use now. So how do we fill those gaps, develop pathways to help our airmen become even better? Because we will say right now, our number one significant advantage against our pacing threats, which we will say is our China,
Mhm.
and somewhat to effect of the other folks like Russia out there,
Mhm.
and our enemies.
We could just say bad
It
actors.
truly is. Right. The bad act. These, our biggest advantage is our NCO corps, specifically our
Mhm.
non-commissioned officers. And the reason why is you can kind of see on the news what's going on with the war in Ukraine.
Right.
For our airmen, we try to train them when big A airmen, we train them in the concept we call mission command,
Mhm.
right? And mission command means that a commander can give clear intent and not tell you how to do something. This is what the objective is. And
Right.
then you can be totally disconnected from communication with your commander, right? But you still know that you have to execute that, and you have the mindset, the decision making skills, and a volatile environment that's constantly changing, and some of the whether it's ethical frameworks and everything else that you need to make sure you make the best decision in those circumstances. And how do you do that? Well, we've been doing that since 1947 when we were developing our airmen, right? So that's one of our big advantages, is because we continuously invest. And right now we're looking at how do we take that to the next level.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we don't think about, we think about having that person ready for battle. But how about that person that's supporting the person that is in the front line, wherever it's on in an airplane, or whether it be on land or in a tank, wherever it is, the person supporting that person to make sure that they have the sleeping bags and the food and the logistics they need is almost as important as that airman having a gun.
Yeah.
Or having the right equipment. That is critical. And what you're seeing now in the wars that are playing out in front of us, you're seeing that one of the reasons they're not moving as fast or as forward as they can is because of the logistical breakdown. And that, I think, is what our military does better than any military in the world.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think, when it comes to logistics, just the planning of moving one aircraft somewhere else, I mean, it takes hundreds of people, and we're trained to do our jobs well. And a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, Glenn and Anthony, I know you've experienced it. We take it for granted how well we're trained because we just do it. We just do it. So it's interesting. But then when I'm in this position now, I peel back, why are we better? And how do we stay ahead? Because that's important. We don't stay ahead by on accident, by happenstance.
Yeah, it seems like it takes so much effort to do all of these things. And if we're talking about logistics, for every human being that's on the front lines, there's got to be 8, 10, 12 people supporting them, from just food and fuel and all of these other things.
I think there's more like tens of thousands.
Yeah, if you think about it, the entire supply chain we're talking about just an aircraft getting off the ground. You're talking about hundreds of people, right? So, absolutely, I 100% agree.
Right. I know it's the Navy, but I look at the, like the aircraft carriers and how everyone has all of these distinct roles and stuff like that, and how they all wear different colors and how they all come together as a different team to get those planes up and out and back and under the deck and all of that. It's pretty amazing stuff. And I know you guys are doing that stuff sort of thing every day, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And that's why we need leaders like you, Chief. And what do you bring when you went in 22 years ago? What is your mindset compared to the mindset of your chief when you were a basic airman? I mean, what are you seeing now that needs to either be improved, changed, or just manipulated or managed a little bit different than when you first came in, outside of what you just said as far as the onboarding?
Yeah, I think the big challenge right now that we're facing is that we have to operate in even more limited constrained resources, right? I mean, it's even more than it was when I came in. I came in 2001, just months before the war. My wife is also active duty, and she's a Master Sergeant. And I was talking to her the other day, and she was talking about professionalism and fitness and stuff. And she felt like, we're always going up and down. But I realized she joined when we were already heavy into war. I came in before that. I came in before the war.
She came in, just for the younger people, and you're talking about pre 9/11 and
pre 9/11. Yep. So she came in 2007. So that was the height of both, the OIF, OEF, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. So she was in the middle of that. So we were a very active and resilient force at that point because we had to. There was no other choice. In 2001, I remember, I'll be honest with you, Anthony, you might remember this. I don't know if it was going on when you were there, but we didn't have like a regular PT test. A physical training test. We had, when I came in, I was administering bicycle tests. The people had to be on a bicycle, and it just measured your VO2 max, your heart level rate, and stuff like that.
Right.
And even before that, I think that there was probably different things. Well, when we transitioned after the war, and now we're super fit, we're working out a lot more. We used to be called the chair force at some point. Some people would call us that because we weren't just as fit, but it changed dramatically. I think that was a big transition for the Air Force, and I think what we need to do now. Because back then we had plenty of resources, and we're kind of coming into about 10 years of an abundance of resources.
Right.
It starts to get limited. Now it's even more as we're downsizing across the force. We have to figure out how do we continue to put the emphasis on lethality of the force and how we can be operationally ready, while we also arm our non-commissioned officers to be able to hone those human resource skills like emotional intelligence, continuously growing their people, because you have to strike such a balance, and we put so much on our young airmen that I wonder, how do we do that without putting more on, without taking something else off, right? Because usually you don't. You end up doing a lot more with less. So those are things that we're working on, and we're trying to figure that out because we're not getting bigger as a force.
Right.
Right.
As a matter of fact, numbers seem to be down, but with technology, you're probably able to make up some of that gap, but it becomes a lot more complex. And the average enlisted individual has to probably learn a whole different skill set than a soldier or an Air Force individual would have 20, 30 years ago. So over your career, how is that kind of changing for you with the types of individuals that are coming in and the paths that those people are able to take to find their own personal success?
Yeah, how we're structured as a force, and we're still even looking at that now. What does it look like for the 2030 and beyond, when it comes to the career fields we have, and how do we incentivize certain special skills and experiences? Because the next big battle is, it may not look, and it likely won't look like a conventional war. We've not been in conventional wars in a while. They've all been asymmetric. So what does that even look like on a different scale? Cyber is a huge piece, that we're looking into. We're trying to look at how do we leverage AI in these platforms. Space Force came on board for a reason, so we are changing. It does look dramatically different than when I came into Air Force.
Chief, just ask ChatGPT. It'll solve all the problems.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? But even what you talked about, Glenn, we talked before we even hit record on here, is what threats come with that. We're trying to make sure that our airmen are digitally literate and understands all that now.
Right. It's kind of crazy because you have to be concerned with the ones and zeros as much as bullets and bombs these days, right? And sometimes when you can't see the threat, particularly if it's digital, it almost doesn't seem real. So how does that affect you in the Air Force, which I would, as an outsider, see as somebody that isn't dealing with that particular type of technology? Obviously, all the planes and everything that goes into it is highly technological beyond stuff that civilians have. But in terms of that day-to-day stuff, I don't think people recognize that necessarily.
So that's something that we're actually trying to change, and we're calling it a digital literacy initiative to really get that out there, to educate people on the threat, but not only just educate, because you can tell our teammates all day, hey, you shouldn't download TikTok, but if they're going to download TikTok, they're going to do it anyway, right? So trying to wrap that all around in that, as well as explaining what the ramifications of just putting yourself out there, what that can do. And it's a challenge. It really is a challenge, because a lot of these things, this is the airmen nowadays were born with this stuff. So they're so easy. They navigate through it so easily, and they think it's
not only that, Chief, but and no offense to anybody, but human brains aren't fully developed at 25. So the young people that are coming into the military don't necessarily understand all the complexity of these issues because they don't have that reasoning skill set in stone yet. And yes, that's why you can't rent a car before you're 25 years old, just in case anyone was interested.
But if we can back up a little bit, one of the things that's really important to me is one, getting people to understand the importance of service to this country, and specifically through the Air Force, because that's my experience. And two, the importance of employers to hire people coming out of the Air Force, because that's some of the best workforce you'll ever find in your life, because you don't go from being a civilian to being military in stages. You go from being that kid that may not have a very developed brain to stuff gets serious quick. The second you get off that bus, you realize you just changed your life. And it's not ever going to be the same, for better or worse for you. Mostly for better, but some people don't make it. I think about 5 people out of my class didn't make it. But it is so critically important, especially today. I get so many calls from people that I know. It's like, hey, Anthony, I have this 22-year-old son, and I haven't launched him yet. He dropped out of college. He's he's depressed, he's lazy, he doesn't know what direction to go to. And I say every one of them, and I haven't been successful with one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Let me talk to him and let me just have a conversation with them. So I always have the conversations, and it always, when they either don't call me back, but to even have the appointment, and when I do talk to them, they never ever, because I don't just say Air Force, I just say, okay, how about the hotel business? How about this? But not one of them is interested in the military. And I think that's such a shame, because you get so much more than you give. Chief, you've given a lot. You've given 22 years of your life. But when you leave the military, the differential of what you've given and what you've received is extraordinary. And no one can understand that unless they've gone through it. So how do you get someone that you're talking to, a young person, man or woman, doesn't matter, and say, what are the benefits during the military? And then also on the other side, what is the benefit of hiring someone that just left the military? Because I know if you left the military and you were looking at the hotel business, I wouldn't interview you. I say, here's the job. You start tomorrow. Teach us what to do.
Yeah.
Because the training you've gone through with 23 years is so intense.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Anthony. I think so. I joined 22 years ago, right? And when I joined, to kind of to Glenn's point too, making them understand something. I don't know if making them understand something is necessarily what we're trying to get at, because most of them understand. Right. You could tell them and they're like, oh, that makes sense, but still not going to do it. Right. I remember when I was a brand new airman, they're like, hey, you should put some money into your retirement fund, or do this, or put some money here, because, it's going to set you off. And I understood, that when I retire, that's going to be better for me. But I didn't care. I didn't even know if I was 35 years old. Sounded so old to me when I was 18, 19 years old. Right. So it's really tough. That's something that we've been trying to figure out. But I could tell you, like, I think a big part of it is representation matters. Being able to go out and get into diverse areas and talk about what the Air Force has done for you, or the service as well. I love all the other services, because, if you joined other service, that's cool, because you're probably going to tell your kids to join the Air Force. Our number one recruiters, I feel like, are parents of other services members, right?
I don't know any other services that they even exist.
Right.
Well, being that there aren't any other services in our military that exist, Chief, what made you go down the route of the Air Force as opposed to any of other great divisions in the military?
So so I joined. I was a product of Anthony. You're from you're from Queens, or what part? You're from New York?
Yes, I'm from New York.
Yeah.
Originally from Brooklyn.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I lived in Jackson Heights, Queens. I was young. We were very poor. Lived that way all the way till I was about a teenager. We moved over to Washington State, and I was a young kid that thought, I don't want to go to college. I'm not even ready to go to college. I'm here chasing girls, trying to figure out how to get rich quick, and I just saw a path not going the right way. I actually joined the delayed entry program, meaning I joined the Army program first at 16. I was going to graduate at 17. And then I found out what the specialty that they were going to sign me up for was, and I decided that wasn't for me. My uncle was a retired Chief Master Sergeant Air Force and told me, hey,
what was the? I want to know what they were going to
doing?
sign you up for in the Army. What were they signing you up for?
It was combat engineer, which I thought sounded really cool, because the engineering part sounded cool, and then combat. You put combat in front of anything, it sounds awesome. But I realized it was a lot of time in the field, blowing up stuff, building stuff just to blow it up again. So it wasn't for me. I didn't think that was something that I was interested in. So I ended up joining the Air Force after my uncle talked me into it. Went there and still didn't think I wanted to go to school. I wanted to learn a craft, a skill. And 22 years later, I have a master's degree, a bachelor's, 2 associates, multiple certifications, and I teach. And I probably paid a max of $4,000 out of pocket for all that education. Max.
Wow. And with all of that education, I wonder if it's like in my wife, with her being in the school district, the more education you get, the more opportunities you have, and they financially compensate you for that education as well. Not just paying for it, but you get like higher, I would guess, higher ranks and higher pay if you get some of those degrees and stuff like that. Is that correct, Chief? I'm just making that up. I don't know for sure.
It makes you more competitive, but the reason why is more important is because, we find in the Air Force, I'll speak on the Air Force's part, especially in my position. We want a force that's not just developed from a technical skill point, but also get constantly trying to improve, right? So whether that's certifications
Mhm.
or just off-duty education, we promote that in our basically, I would say I'll call it our doctrine, our principles that we want our airmen to be able to grow. Because once again, going back to that principle that I talked about earlier, is how do you exercise mission command if you're not educated, smart on what's going on? You've developed character and some of the just agile mindsets, and you don't get that all. We have great educational institutions within the Air Force,
Mhm.
but we're not naive enough to think that the civilian institutes don't have a whole different perspective. So we want our airmen to go do that. So is it mandatory to go through school and get all those degrees to make certain ranks? To some point there are, and I won't get into the details of which rank requires what, but it does make you more competitive.
Yeah,
It is
and
it's a key
and
factor.
to become a chief, 1% of chiefs, right? So
Mhm,
to become a chief, it is insanely competitive, and I would
mhm.
imagine there are no chiefs today that are walking around without a bachelor's degree, and probably very few walking around without a master's degree. Would that be safe to say, Chief?
I would say that we're pretty close to that. There's still some chiefs out there who have their associate's degree, and that's required. But I think the days of them not having a bachelor's anymore, that's probably numbered.
Right.
And because we do have quite a broad force still. We have people still at their 30-year mark now. So
Yeah,
Wow.
and and you get a review every year. I used to be in charge of what are
mhm.
they called,
Yeah.
APRs, Chief?
Yeah, back then APRs, now EPRs, evaluation performance reports. Mhm.
So the one thing you want in your, at least back in the day, and I wrote 1,000 of them a day, because I was basically the admin assistant. And you want the words above reproach. Do they still use those words, Chief?
No, now the closest to the right on the evaluations will exceeded most, if not all, expectations.
Right, because
Hey, just like hotels, I hope.
Yeah, yeah.
when I was getting promoted, I had, I got my bachelor's degree in 3.5 years at night before I
Wow.
left the Air Force. I got my bachelor's degree because I was hyper competitive. And if I stayed in,
Mhm.
I knew I was going to have to be on that track to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I just remember every one of I just read some of them. I just pulled some up recently out of this box I have. And every one of them said above reproach. And if you didn't
Mm.
have, was it tens or threes or fours? I can't remember. What's the highest rating?
I think on the APRs, that was before my time, so I think they were
Okay.
nines. I think they were
Yeah.
nines on
So,
the APRs.
so
Yeah.
basically, I don't have one APR that wasn't basically
Uh,
100% of all
Right.
the nines.
mm,
Because back in the day when I was doing them, if you did, if you had some ace or whatever, that's fine once in a while. If you had sevens, you were done. And it's just a hyper competitive force. And
mhm.
again, we're so fortunate to speak to you, Chief. But in order to be working at the Pentagon for Chief Master Sergeant Bass, to be a Chief Master Sergeant, especially after 16, 17 years, it's very few. It's very difficult. And you have to be on all the time. But like you said, you came from nothing, you made something yourself, you have all this education. And again, you don't want to tell people something. You want people to pick it up themselves. I was fortunate enough that when people laid stuff down for me, I picked it up. I didn't
Right.
even have to be told twice. I was on the honor guard. I did everything I was told to do,
Yep.
and I was promoted because of it. And I was working at the right hand of the commander
Mhm.
relatively quickly. So what do you do? How do you influence that? Because one of the things I want you to understand, Glenn,
Mhm.
and the audience that never been in the military, it's all there for you to pick up. If you don't
Mhm.
pick it up, you don't pick it up. There are certain things that if you don't pick up, you get out of the Air Force, you get thrown out.
Right.
Mhm.
But really to succeed at the level that the chief has succeeded at, it's all in front of you, and it's up to you whether you pick it up. So,
Yeah.
Chief, how do you influence people?
So you know what? First, I try to find out what they want to do, and I think the reason why I say that I start with that why is because not everybody wants to be a chief master sergeant. Not everybody wants to have the responsibility that comes with it. Not everybody wants to even do a 20-year career.
Right.
Maybe they came in to get their skills. So I asked them with authentic curiosity, what are your goals and why?
Mhm.
I've actually asked a E7 one time. I was like, "What's your goal?" And they said, "I want to make chief master sergeant." I said, "Well, why?" And that question kind of set them back. Like, what do you mean why? I was like, why do you want to be
Yeah.
a chief master sergeant? I think that's important for us to have a conversation about, because maybe you don't even realize what that entails. It's just, the pot at the end of the rainbow, and it's not a
Right.
lot of rainbows. I promise you. On the other side of this, there's a lot more responsibility that comes with it. So I try to find out what it is. But if they do tell me that they want to progress in the Air Force and go as far as they can, I tell them the first thing that they got to do is, let's make sure that you're consistent with what you're
Mhm.
saying and what your behaviors are going to be. Because I hear a lot of people that say they want it, but they're
Right.
not willing to put the work in for it, right? And I put
That
out.
seems to be a larger problem in society, I think.
Right, right.
than
And
it
we're a
feels in the real
microcosm.
world.
We're a microcosm of society, right? Except, we shoot a lot more weapons, right? I mean,
Yeah,
well,
right.
depends where you're from, right? But anyway, so I try to find out, what it is, and then I tell them, there's multiple paths to get to that. This is mine, but every path, I will tell you, have something in common, and that each of those people, they worked very hard,
Mhm.
and they also figured out what it means to be a professional. And what I mean by that is, professionals don't, they take initiative, like Anthony talked about. They don't just wait to be told what to do, and they don't
Yep.
only grow and become better at their whatever their profession is on
Mhm.
duty time. There's a lot of people that say, well, you're not paying me to go to that course. Well, it's like, yeah,
Right.
but you know what? There's a lot of people that are trying to master their craft on their off duty time. Those people are called professionals. Michael Jordan didn't only practice his free throws when he was, on the clock, whatever that might be. So are
Yeah.
you a professional? Because if you're not, you're probably not going to achieve
I
the
think
goal.
that is incredible.
Mhm.
That piece of advice is so important because I've heard that so much in my life.
Mhm.
Well, are we getting paid for it?
Mhm.
Well, again, are you a professional?
Right.
And I'll use Glenn as a great example. Glenn has done more flying in cocktail parties and events for free than
Mhm.
anybody I've ever met. And the reason he has a successful business is because he's a professional. He
Mhm.
shows up for things that he knows eventually are going to pay off in the long run. And they do. He knows everybody in our industry. He has him speed dial.
Thanks.
So, but his professionalism of showing
Mhm.
up and
Right.
doing the extra work is what got him in the position of access. Because we all, whether you're in the military or whether you're in the civilian world, what's more important than money and power is access.
Mhm.
And if you have access, the money
Right.
and the power comes. And only by being professional can you gain that access. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, well, thank
Yeah.
you for the compliments. And Chief, let me add to that. I think that the broader problem we're having in society is it's all about instant gratification, and I want
Mhm.
it now, and people aren't willing sometimes to put in that hard work. So I suppose if you're trying to, develop these people as your enlisted force development role, and you probably are able to ferret out who are the ones that are going to really be professionals, who are the ones that are punching the clock, and who are the ones that are going to wash out pretty quick. And how do you handle all of those different types of situations?
So, and it's interesting. How do we handle it? I think that all of those people have value. I look at it that way,
Right.
right? I mean, we are a giant organization, and we can't have everybody that wants to stay until 20. We can't have everybody that wants to
Right.
do, we can't have, it's only 1%. So you're not all going to make chief master sergeant. So I think a big component is treating everybody like they're humans,
Right.
finding out what they want to do,
Mhm.
where the Air Force can help them get to their goals. At the same time, you're going to be doing what you need to do for the Air Force, because it's organizational needs as well. And when you can marry those two up, it's really important. But one thing that I love to tell my teammates as they're growing is, you need to embrace good work. And I
Mhm.
call it good work, and I think good work has three components. One, is it influential, impactful? Does it move the needle? That's one component of being good, of good work. The other one is, does it have some training value? Does it have some development value? Are you going to grow from this? Right. And the third thing is, it's got to be hard. You got to embrace that it's going to be hard. Nothing comes from just getting through easy all the time, right? And that's not where growth lies. So I tell people often that, in my personal opinion, the number one just the number one indicator that somebody has leadership potential, and
Right.
that's what we promote for, is leadership potential, not what you've already done. Because if you already
Right.
done that well, that doesn't mean you're ready for the next rank. It means you should probably stay where you're at, right?
Mhm.
What we look at is leadership potential, and the number one indicator is adaptive followership to me. Are you a flower that only blooms in a perfect environment? Or are you one that I can put into these different environments, and you're going to excel and learn, and maybe you take a couple bumps, but you're going to keep moving forward? right? And that's what we're looking for. That's what we need in the
Yeah.
environment that we're in right now.
You know, what the Air Force taught me was, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?"
Right.
Meaning,
I
you know,
learned that from Animal House.
you know,
Yeah.
it's but you just learn that yes, sir, thank you. I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do
Mhm.
that. I'll do that. I'll do
Mhm.
that. I'll do that. If you think I can do it, then that means I probably can do it. And
Right.
what fascinated me when I got in the military is I was dating a young lady that I didn't go to school, she would have been upset. Matter of fact, she followed me to my duty station
Mm.
and made sure I signed up at Park College on base.
Wow.
And I was shocked by how many people after 4 years didn't have any college credit. And
Yeah.
what they say is they're going to get out and they're going to get college after they
Yeah.
get out. And
Mhm.
I didn't understand that mindset.
Yeah.
You can do this. The Air Force is paying you to do it. The Air Force will give you time to do it. Most cases, some cases you have you have a job that just doesn't really allow you to go to school as much as I was able to do because I was an administrator. But I was shocked by the number of people. I would say over 90% of the people that I knew, and I knew almost everybody on base, did not go to college on
Mhm.
base. And only two people, me and this other young lady, were the only people to get our bachelor's degree in the I got in 3.5 years, in the 4 years that we were in. And it was extraordinary to me that people didn't take advantage of it. Do you still see that? Or are people coming in and basically taking advantage of that at bigger percentages?
A bigger percentage for sure. We're the most educated enlisted force that's ever been, right? In
Wow.
the past, we have more degrees now across. I remember when I finished senior NCO academy. When I got out, they listed off the degrees that were in that class. And
Mhm.
from PhDs, bachelor's, associates. When they listed them off, I was like, wow, that's a lot of education in this room. And we had hundreds of people in there. I would say we are definitely more educated than we've ever been. But I would say there's still some people that just aren't into it. And you know what? Some people
That's
just aren't
okay.
into education. But you know what? We've also branched out though. Maybe they're not into what we consider traditional education. We are incentivizing as an Air Force a lot more when it comes to certifications and credentialing. And we just continuously improve that program. Where at one point I was only able to get one certification, and pretty much my entire allotment was gone. And whether it costed $100 or $4,500, and now I can get one in multiple facets. One in my degree program that I may have been, one in leadership because of my rank and position, and then also in my original career field, type stuff. So there's so many more opportunities. So we're continuously branching out. So I really don't think there's a reason why people aren't growing. And if they're not doing it through that way, they need to find another way. Because I tell people all the time, the more you stay stagnant and you want to be a leader and you supervise and lead people and you're not growing, you're putting a lid on them. You're putting a lid on their growth. And maybe you don't mean to, but you are. And that's going to create some resentment when they become smarter than you on a lot of things, right?
Yeah. And that often happens. And thank you so much for promoting my certification program that will be
Yes.
launching soon.
Yes.
We'll make sure you get the certification program. So if you ever want to go in the hotel
Heck yeah.
business, you'll get the Anthony Mercuri certification program.
Only if we're working together. Only if we're
Yeah,
working together. I think
and
it'd be
one,
awesome.
one of the things that really strikes me is, Chief, a lot of the things that you're saying seem to be the same principles that people should be following in the hospitality business as well. Always do a little bit more, get that education, the whole notion of finding what you love to do and figuring what your role is in the organization. So I really love having all of that overlap. But hey, Anthony, one of the things that I'm curious about is how all of this works. How do you get from point A to all the way up to point Z or whatever it is that Chief is at? How do all the ranks and stuff kind of
Well, let's first of all bring up that graphic that Dr. Producer has, and then the chief is a lot better versed at it than I am. But so basically, when I was in, you see, okay, so basically, when you're in the Airman Basic, that's when you first get to basic training,
right?
and then you automatically get rank as long as you stay in it in good form. Until what rank? Senior Airman, is that correct, Chief?
Yep, until senior airman, and that's the one you could get it early, but there's still by time. Even if you don't get early, you'll get it.
Right, but there's what do you have to go from senior airman to staff sergeant? Oh wow, where's sergeant? You don't have sergeant anymore?
Yeah, so no more. So yep, so it goes from Airman Basic to E4, which is Senior Airman. That changed before I came in the Air Force. I remember that they talked about it where they had the sergeant role and the buck sergeant.
That's me right here. I was
Yep. Yeah. So we have Senior Airman, then you go into a Staff Sergeant, which is an E5, and that's when you become a non-commissioned officer. So when you make that transition from E4 to E5, there's a couple things you have to do. You have to earn certain skill levels. You also, meaning in your profession, in your actual Air Force specialty, whatever that is. Mine was a generator mechanic, right? And you also have to go to Airman Leadership School, which is a professional military education. It's our first one, and you go through that course, and then you also have to test, right? You have to test. You have to take a test, and it goes off of your evaluations, like what Anthony was talking about. How well you scored on your evaluations, you get points for that, and you also take a test, and also if you've got any type of decorations for meritorious service thus far, and then and then within your specialty, you compete against everybody else in that specialty for that rank, and depending on what the percentages are that year, you're either above the line or below the line. Below the line just means you're not promoted that year. Above, you are, and right now. As we're downsizing, we're having to look at like what do those percentages look like. So it fluctuates depending on what we need at the time. So that's the first time you have to compete. It's not automatic, and then you also have to compete for E6 test, and that test is significantly different from E5 to E6 because you're going from generalities a little bit to more technical, right, to details. You get to, because we expect our E6s to be technical experts and leaders within their specialty, and they're also usually running a work center, maybe anywhere between 15 to 30 people, depending on what specialty in. And then we transition to E7, which you don't take a test. Now it's just board. You're boarded. All of your records, everything you've done for a set amount of years is reviewed, and then they determine whether or not you're ready to go to that next rank. You'll also see,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm curious. After you get to a certain level, does it take you longer to go from one designation to another than it would have from like a 2 to a 3, for example?
So it really depends. Yes, it does on certain ranks. I remember E3, I felt like it was the longest rank ever. Even though I got promoted early to E4, it still felt like it lasted forever. And that's the longest rank that you don't have a ton of control over. Everything else, it really depends on how well do you do your tests, how are your evaluations, right?
How much you put into it is what you get out of it.
Right. And there's time that you do have to wait, and there's other certifications you have to, or upgrades that you have to get to that next level. But so for instance, from E5 to get to E6, you have to get what we call a 7 level, which we call a craftsman level. So we use apprentice, journeyman, craftsman. So you have to have that skill level as well as make that rank by testing and everything else where you're competing. When you go to E7, E8, and E9, you're actually, at that point, you're just being boarded off of your records. There's no longer a test now. There used to be. I was probably one of the last chiefs, maybe last 2 cycles, actually still had to take a test.
Hey, lucky you.
Wow. So wait. So as a Chief Master Sergeant, because I remember the test, because Chief Master Sergeant Lois was my mentor. She had to take a test, and I remember the test was very stressful.
It was. I would say that the Chief Master Sergeant test was the hardest test I've ever taken in my life. And the reason why is because all 4 answers are right, and you're looking for the component that the answer that's the most right on a lot. So it was very difficult. Something I also wanted to point out that we have in the military and the Air Force, we use it a little bit differently than we do in Army. Is you see the first sergeant rank right underneath the E7, E8, and E9. They're distinguished by that diamond in there, and sometimes we call them the diamond or the first shirt or the first sergeant. That person specifically it can be any of those ranks. And that person's job specifically is to advise the commander on morale, discipline, enforcing standards, and they work direct together with the chief master sergeant of a unit and the commander. So we call that the triad. So that's a special we call it a special duty. So we also feel like development is career broadening. So when I was E7, I got to step out of my career field as an engineer and worked in a social services center.
Right.
And it took a wire brush to me and gave me generosity, kindness, and empathy, right? And then I came back into my career field. So we do a lot of that. That's considered development as well.
And would you say like the first sergeant, my first sergeant was Chief Master Sergeant or Senior Master Sergeant Earhart, and he was we called him First Sergeant, but
Yep.
would you consider him like the human resources person? Like he's the person I would go in the office when I'm like, everybody's driving me crazy, Chief. I need some help.
Yes, I would say yes, but human resources is broad, right? So I would say yes to a lot of it, and then also that whole commander support staff of teammates to include the administrative folks, I consider all of them the human resource experts, right? Processing
Right.
paperwork to whether it's instilling discipline, processing evaluations, or getting making sure that we're all lined up on the rules, labor agreements, everything.
Right. And they'll like if you're having a problem with your boss who outranks you, the first shirt will kind of come in and mentor you and help you through that. Now, I want to point out when I was in Master Sergeant,
Right.
had all of their stripes,
Yeah.
facing the same way. And
Yeah.
then only when you were senior did you have a line above the other lines.
Right.
And at some point they changed that.
Yeah.
And I remember anytime you saw a senior with that line above, it just felt like he was more important or she was more important.
Yeah. So I can't, I should probably know this better when it comes to the history, but originally there was only E1 through E7. We didn't have a E8 and E9 rank.
Really?
So I think at some point there was it probably followed that transition at some point to realize that we wanted to put that top, we call that a deflector. On the E7 and the E8 and E9, there's deflectors so that we can deflect it instead of catch it all on the way down and protect our people underneath, right?
and then when you're the command chief master sergeant, explain that rank.
So command chief master sergeant is typically at what we call a wing or a base level, right? Sometimes they're not the base level, but they're at what we consider a wing. And then they are the principal advisor to the wing commander on all things, really all things people. Right, all things people. A lot of people say that they focus on the enlisted, but no, it's all things people, including family and the family that might be on base, as well as the officers and the total force. So, so that's a very special role as well.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the families, it's so important. Think about your family, your mother, your father going away for 6 months, and what it takes to support that family. It probably takes more resources and more energy to support the family than it does to support the soldier.
Yeah, I would say, and especially from my previous job before I came into this one, I was at Osan Air Base in Korea, and I was the senior enlisted leader or the chief master sergeant of the civil engineer squadron that's responsible for housing, the electrical grid on base, sewage, every single thing that you could think of, including airman dorm housing as well as family stuff. So I would say that it's a huge part of the plate, right? There's a lot of things going on, but families are always on our priority list to make sure they're taken care of.
And then it comes to the Grand Poobah, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. Now, there's only one.
Yep.
And that person, again, when I was young, and I met one Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force for a second, it was like, for me, I was meeting God.
Yeah.
Right? Two things. One, how critical is that role? And two, is that some role you ever want to achieve?
Extremely critical, right? It's the voice of all of the enlisted people, as well as really all the people, just like the command chief, but it's for the whole Air Force now, right? Her and I, we talk pretty often, as well as the rest of the team, because we're in that development personnel program area. And of course, what touches everybody is personnel issues, right? I mean, that touches every single career field out there. It doesn't matter if you fly jets or you work on an electrical system. You have personnel stuff. Right. You want to make sure you get paid right. These are things that are very important because patriotism is awesome, but you start getting zero paychecks all the time, it's going to be real hard to keep a family going and being able to keep your mind on whatever the mission is. So these are all important things in that support that we talked about earlier. So she's responsible for making sure all that stuff gets taken care of, and she has a giant team of us to help her get after it.
Right. And I knew you wouldn't answer the second question, so I'll let you off the hook.
Yeah.
All right. So what? Go ahead.
I just want to say the one thing I'm really amazed at is coming into this with the interview we did with Chief Master Sergeant Bass, and through this one is really understanding that it is about taking care of that individual and all the people that support that individual, much more so than just the person who's in the military. So I had no idea all of these things existed, and you're all really looking at a holistic approach of making sure everyone is cared for. And if you want to check out our show with Chief Master Sergeant Bass, go back to 1227. I think it was.
And I listened to that, and it was awesome. It was a great episode.
She is, oh my gosh, she's one of my favorite human beings. And one of the things that you may not know this, Glenn or Chief, Chief Justice Ginsburg, who's also has something that we have in common. She's from New York. She's actually from Brooklyn. She went to Maslin High School, a high school I used to wrestle against. Do you know how she touched the Air Force?
No.
Okay. She, back in the day, she was very, my daughter's calling, very, women's rights was very important to her. And one of the things that she did, there was a technical sergeant, female, that was, I think she was a tech sergeant. She was going she was on base, and then they were moving off base, if I remember right. And when they were moving, she went to what's the office where you go to get your housing and all that stuff? What's that office?
Housing office. That's what we call it now. I don't know what they called it back then.
And so they didn't give her the stipend for rent off base, which we all get when we were off base. She didn't get the stipend. You know why? Because she was married to a man that was also in the military, and they said, your husband gets the stipend. And she's like, that has nothing to do with me. I get a stipend too. I'm in the military, and Chief Justice Ginsburg fought and won that case. And the reason females in the Air Force get the same stipend as a man is because of Chief Ginsburg.
Wow.
All right. And as it
she
should
fought
be,
that and won that to Supreme Court.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because diversity and inclusion is such a big deal for so many reasons, and something I'm very passionate about. And I remember when I came into Air Force, being in a civil engineer career, there was females in my career field, right? I seen them, but they were very few and far between.
Right.
The last time I was stationed in Korea, I remember first looking around and really noticing that I had 3 female commanders in my squadron. And they were all engineer background, right? I mean, and we've been promoting STEM. And the thing about it is, I tell people all the time, when it comes to this, because we need to have a diverse leadership team, as well as diversity across our force. And now, does diversity in itself automatically mean we're going to become a better force? No, we need to be intentional about inclusion, right? And making sure that we have some deliberate approaches to it. But I will say that if you don't have that representation, you're definitely not going to get the perspectives. And this comes up all the time. And now I think when I see pictures of Chief Master Sergeant Air Force Bass and all the Chief Master Sergeants that are female, and I also see command teams. My boss right now is a general, and she's a female. And you look at it and it's like, it's so amazing, because we need that perspective at the table. And the only way to do that is to be intentional about it. So I've asked people before, I was like, you got 5 people on a command list. That means they're all qualified to be a commander. One's a female, 4 are males. And the one, she was selected, and her being female was also a contributing factor of her being selected. And immediately the place goes nuts. People are upset. Like, what do you mean? Well, she shouldn't have got picked up because she's a female. I was like, did I say she got picked up just because she's a female? And then someone will say, well, she'd be the most qualified person. I was like, define most qualified. All right. Because what if we don't have enough female commanders in that base, and we need more female voice at the table? Does that make her more qualified now? Right. But people immediately think about themselves and not the organizational needs. So I know I went off on a tangent there, but I really
no, I think it's a critical tangent because we're
Right.
finding that across the board in the hospitality industry. We had we tried not to do shows about diversity. We try to just have shows that have diversity.
Although we do shows that are focused on that.
Yeah. But we're trying to do just shows that have diverse population.
Right.
And I remember we had a brand, I won't name who, and we were talking about diversity. And there wasn't one person that they sent that was that wasn't diversity. I was like, I think there were 4 people and they all looked like me and Glenn.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you kidding me? So it is very important to say that because especially when in the military, it is so razor thin when you're getting to that level of promotion to chiefs or generals. Everybody is extremely competent. Right. So does one person have a little edge over somebody else? It's almost impossible to find. Right. It's like when you're racing, Formula Ones and you win by an eighth of one, you still won, but you won by an eighth of a second. Are you really that much better than that person? No.
Right. It sounds like
I think that's a really good point.
It sounds like every judge's decision on the show chopped as well.
Let me start on that show, please.
but you guys are both right. It's very important, and for the military, I would say it's even more important in some ways because it's so important that we not only have retention, retaining the right people, but we're also recruiting, and to make sure that we recruit talent, it has to be across the board. And if you don't have representation matters, right? So if I can't see me in that uniform, then I may never even think that I should apply. Right. I can't see it. So I think that's very important to inspire.
So when was the first time you saw somebody in a much higher rank than you that looked like you? Do you remember?
You know what? So this is, I love that you asked me that. So being a Korean American born in Korea, coming to the States, a lot of the Koreans that I saw were actually officers. They're commissioned officers. They either went into legal, doctors, whatever, everything that's commissioned, right? I was enlisted because I just didn't have the opportunities to go to school, nor was I even ready to go to school, right? And I did not see high-ranking enlisted Korean Americans until many years down the road. I mean, man, I can't even think of when I first started seeing senior non-commissioned officers that were Korean born. So I felt like I was alone for a long time. I'll be honest with you.
You were, and even television shows like MASH, which took place in Korea, didn't even have Koreans in the roles that were supposed to be Korean.
Right. So Chief, explain, because I've never been able to explain this well, the difference between non-commissioned officer and commissioned officer.
Okay, so really it comes down to, if you're a non-commissioned officer, you have authorities, but you did not get your commissioning, meaning that you are you didn't come in and go through a commissioning program, which required you to already have a 4-year degree or be close to one, depending on what programs you go in. So you came in. A commissioned officer will be ranging from a lieutenant to a general, where non-commissioned officers, you get that title at the rank of E5, and that's across the services. E5, they call them different names, but the pay grade of E5, and it goes all the way to Chief Master Sergeant, where some Chief Master Sergeants out there, I'm not, they will not say that they're an NCO. I'm an NCO. I happen to be a senior NCO, but I'm still an NCO. And there's certain authorities that come with being a non-commissioned officer, including lawful orders.
Right. So tell everyone out there what a lawful order is.
A lawful order is something. It's really it's not going to be unethical, right? It's going to it's not going to break any laws, and it's going to be towards a goal or mission, right? A requirement. So if I have the authority to give a lawful order, because there's always been this rumor that enlisted people can't give any orders. Like, you can give a lawful order to somebody to go do something, right? It could be something as simple as we're cleaning up the work center to make sure we're good to go. Go take out the trash, airman, or take out the trash, tech sergeant, right? Whatever that is, that's a lawful order. An unlawful order is me telling someone to cover something up that was completely illegal, to use resources in an illegal way, to even do something that using my influence to try to get something done that's only for personal gain, right?
Right.
That's the
And I
big
think
thing.
that's critically important. You can't give, like, I can't take an illegal order. So if he tells me to do something
Yeah.
that I know is not in the Uniform Code of Military Justice,
Right.
I can't do it because I'm going to get in trouble too. Now we're both, in trouble.
Right.
So, Chief, I'd imagine during your career, someone said, "Hey, why don't you go get your commission?" So, one, did that happen? And two, why haven't you?
It did. So it took me a while to get my bachelor's degree. There was a couple things I wanted to do when I was younger. I was looking at law enforcement opportunities as well as uh, potentially getting my commission. And as time went on, I really enjoyed being close to the airmen. Right,
Right.
meaning the E1 through E4 and the young non-commissioned officers, because I found that my vocation, although my profession is the U.S. military, right, and my meaning and purpose is teaching, and my vocation I feel like I've lined up, especially in this position right now. So I just always felt that I'd have the most influence over the most people staying enlisted. Now, it's not to say that commissioned officers don't have that influence, but typically their mindset's more in the command role, right? They're not doing the same thing. So as a chief, I have influence of mentorship and development of not just my enlisted teammates, but also my junior officers, because just through experience and leadership.
Right. And if the junior officer, and I imagine you run into this good and bad, if the junior officer gets and understands the chief master sergeant roles, the junior officer will have a much better time than if they don't understand the chief master sergeant's role. Because the chief master sergeant, what's my big fat Greek wedding? It's like the man is the head and the woman's the neck, and can turn that. It's kind of like a chief. The chief can turn the head any way you want, especially with the junior officers. And also the other enlisted people are looking at that lieutenant or that captain and how they treat the chief. And if they don't treat the chief with respect, that lieutenant and that captain and that major is not getting respect from the NCOs. I've seen it firsthand, and I haven't given respect that maybe a lieutenant could have received. I would do what he tells me to do, but doesn't mean I have to respect him. And I think that's critically important, because the young airmen and NCOs have so much respect for chiefs. I would even say, not that we don't respect the officers, but the chiefs look like us. They look like they're our people. They come from our ranks, and it's really, really they're very special people to us.
Yeah,
At
I
least
would
to me.
agree. And I think the officers, and it has nothing to do with me as a person or any other chief, but the position, it comes with a lot of responsibility to make sure they take care of the enlisted force and organize, train, equip, and develop. But where an officer has their chief sit is where they often see how they see their enlisted force stands, right? Where they stand, right? So if I'm sitting way down the table, my commander, I represent the enlisted force of this unit, whether that's 600 people strong, a huge majority of that are still going to be enlisted teammates. 9 times out of 10 is going to be enlisted. So I'm there to represent them. Now, long as I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a chief master sergeant, representing correctly and doing everything ethically, the command team is a chief master sergeant, a unit commander, and their first sergeant. They work together to influence that squadron. So I think it's very important. If I've told this to commanders before, it's like, hey, where you have us sit at the table is where you see us stand as an enlisted force.
Right. Interesting.
And I think that's perfect. And because I'm a competitive person, I asked Chief Bass. I said, Chief, where do you sit in a formal event? She goes, I sit near the lieutenant generals. I was like,
Yeah.
And that's important, because if the chief was sitting down, again, no disrespect to the lieutenants, but if the chief is sitting before a lieutenant, that just shows you how important she is to the force. And I think that's a great example. I told Glenn, I said, she basically sits with the 3-star generals, and she's how she put it was, she's basically at the 4-star level, but at the highest rank of 3-star, something like that. I can't remember. Yeah. But that was important to me to hear as an NCO.
Yeah, she holds protocol requirements as a general officer. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Anthony, before we wrap up, do you have any more serious questions? I got a more lighthearted one too.
Yeah, I have a serious question. Okay. Yeah. What is the oldest you can enlist in the military today?
I want to say, man, I hope I don't get this wrong. I want to say it's 38 right now.
Wow.
Are you sure it's not 57? Because Glenn's thinking about it.
There's waiver.
5 years to make that choice.
Anthony, I think.
Well, no, I'm saying I'm giving you time. I'm giving you time.
Yeah, yeah. I think Anthony. I think you've heard this even while you're in, right? Like everything has a waiver.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I'm in better shape. I was in better shape than I was in the military, and I have more energy than I had when I was in the military. So I'm ready to go. But it's interesting you said about. I thought it was going to be so difficult in basic training from a physical standpoint. Basically, all we had to do is make sure you ran a mile under 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was 12 minutes. Do a few push-ups and sit-ups, and when you got in trouble, instead of them throwing push-ups at you, they give you a 1041, a 541, a 1041,
341.
341. They give you a 341 that you have in your pocket right here.
Yeah.
Okay, and you take it out and give it to them. I was like, that's like, I want to get yelled at. I want to get like push-ups. I don't want to just get paperwork.
But Dr. Suzanne has an answer to our questions. Each branch has a different. Air Force is 39. Coast Guard 31, Marines 28, Navy 39, Army 35, and Space Force 39.
There you go. So I was off by 1 year. So you know what's the reason why, one of the big reasons why is we've discovered that there are 38, 39-year-olds that are in just as good shape, if not better, than some of our 18-year-olds right now. Right. I mean, so that the physical barrier isn't there. And something else I want to share with y'all is like, we bounce this number around. I've heard it different versions of it, but only about 25% of the American public would qualify to serve in the military.
Yeah, I would.
Only 1% does. Only 25%, whether that's criminal issues, whether that's something else that they have going on, whether that's competence, whether that's health issues or whatever, there's only like about 25%, and only 1% actually do.
Wow.
What we're actually trying to do now is broaden that 25% because some of our own policy is probably casting that net too small for whatever reasons, right? Yeah.
And actually, and I know when I was in, getting in the Air Force was really difficult. Almost all my friends that joined the military couldn't get in the Air Force. How the hell I got in the Air Force, I'll never know. Well, actually, I know I did really well on that part of the test that was administrative. I got the basically highest score you can get, but I couldn't get any others. Like I was horrible. I remember mechanic, engineering. I probably got zeros, but in the administrative part, I was, I got the best score you can get. And if it wasn't for that, if I just would have gotten an average score, I wouldn't have gotten in. But I guess they saw something in that score. It's like, oh, okay, he's an administrator. Right. He can do that. And that's kind of where I excel. But nobody I knew can get in. It was difficult to get in the Air Force even back 1986. So a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the question I have for you is kind of a 2-for-1 question based on entertainment, based on the military. Personally, what is either your favorite television show or movie that was based on the military? It could be something silly like Hogan's Heroes or something new like Maverick. And what do you think was the most accurate representation in entertainment of the military?
MASH.
Man,
no, I'm kidding.
Man, that's a tough one. The accurate part is a tough one. So I would say probably the movie I would say was the original Top Gun. I mean, that movie it's funny because I didn't know that was Navy. I was young. I thought that was Air Force. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Everybody thinks that's the Air Force.
Yeah, and I loved it. I loved Maverick, but I still have that first the Top Gun in my heart. Right, I hold that. So that would be the first. When it comes to TV shows, there's so many good ones out there. I think the one that I just love the most, and I don't know how realistic it is because I didn't.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I didn't live in the special ops world, but it was the unit. I loved the unit until it got kind of weird, like season 3 or 4. And one of the reasons why I liked it, was the fact that they failed missions. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I was like, there's a lot of shows that I was watching up to that point. It's like they always succeeded. I was like, that's not realistic at all. Like we fail. There's a lot of variables. You're in a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous environment called VUCA. There's always happening. So I was like, there's no way. And they fail quite often, but it was very realistic in that respect. At least I thought. Yeah. Right. When it comes to realism, I'm not sure what's really realistic out there. I mean, I think Black Hawk Down was probably pretty darn realistic. That movie, That's another great recruiting tool for the Air Force. I'll tell you what, because there was airmen in that mission,
Really?
but they didn't show them very much. And I remember a friend of mine was a recruiter, and he told me that what he'd do is put out the Air Force recruiting Raptor, which is the big truck, and then he'd
Yeah.
play that movie, and then all the people that look at it would walk away from the Army folks and sign up for the Air Force.
Yeah, it's when I was in Honduras, I was at basically a MASH base, and
Mhm.
I worked for a gentleman that was like Colonel Jessup, and so to me, that movie, oh my God, it just popped out of my head. The Colonel Jessup movie,
Black Hawk Down.
no, good, Few Good Men. My daughter just,
right.
my daughter just played. My daughter just played in there. She
Yeah.
played the Demi Moore character on stage. But anyway, that to me was realistic, simply because I saw that level of intensity and I didn't see any criminality, but I saw that when I was attached to the Army base in Honduras, it was different. When that colonel said something, we were scared. In the Air Force, the colonel was a little bit different. We respected the colonel, but they didn't scare the crap out of us. Being on that base, this gentleman who I consider a mentor and a friend, and really taught me how, he just passed away, but really taught me what management was about. I won't say leadership, because he was a great leader, but I never call myself a leader. I call myself a manager. What a great manager was about. And there are different, and I'm sure, Chief, you've been in situations, and he taught me this, where if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. And it's atypical of what you think about, but there are some situations, whether it be in war or preparing for war, where you got to do what the commander tells you to do. And there's a time for your opinion. And right now, when I tell you to take that hill, that ain't the time.
Yeah.
And he taught me that. He taught me that.
Yeah, and that's where discipline comes into play, right? And I think that's what, when I say serving people and taking care of them, what I talked about a little bit earlier, taking care of people is also instilling discipline and helping people discern when it's time to have a growth mindset and ask why, and when it's time to have a fixed mindset and get up that hill, right? And I think that's also very important when it comes to development. So great point.
Yeah. And anyway, it's an honor. When I met you, it was an honor. It's an honor to be on the show with you, and thank you for all you do. And when you're ready to come in and retire, let me know. We have a brand of hotels for you to run.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll take you up on it, Anthony.
Chief, thanks so much for being here. And please just hang out backstage while we wrap up. We'd like to say
I want to say one other thing. How many people, when your title is Chief, what is your title exactly?
Chief of Enlisted Force Development.
Okay, so how many people are you overseeing?
So that's the funny thing. People wise, we're we don't want to try to make the staff positions up high, absorb so much manpower, right? Because we really have a very small team doing something for 410,000 people.
Right. So you influence that point.
Right. Yeah.
Your job and your decisions with your team influence the entire NCO community.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Thanks again for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so grateful to have you on.
Thank you. Anthony, I love these kinds of shows where we can really see how other industries and our military kind of fit into the whole American way of life.
You know, it's interesting. When we were Chief Master Sergeant Bash, you didn't get coined, and you didn't get coined again. Haha.
Yeah, I know. Well, what are you going to do? I'm not special, but what are you going to do? If only I was 38, I'd be able to join and maybe get coined up.
For all those 38-year-olds that are ready to kind of serve, man, go. But the only thing is, just be prepared when you're in basic training to be around 18-year-olds that are going to make fun of you.
Yeah. Good point. If you don't want to get made fun of, why not listen to our shows every day? It'll arm you with the knowledge you need. Listen on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get your shows, we are at. And of course, if you're listening, why not watch us? Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, NoVacancyNews.com, housing all our shows. He's at Anthony Hotels. I'm at Traveling Glenn. Thanks everyone for, I did that by mistake. Thanks everyone for being here. And remember, you've got one life, so blaze on and
be kind to yourself.
Tomorrow, Chat GPT. That should be a great conversation. See you then.
Okay. I'm going to